Hello, everyone. So welcome back to the show. I have a great guest today, Teri Cochrane. She's the author of an awesome book called The Wildatarian Diet. So welcome to the show, Teri.
Thanks so much to be with you. So happy to be with you, Eugene, and your audience.
Yeah, thank you. Greatly appreciated. I guess before we begin, can you give like a quick introduction to yourself about like what you do, your background, and how you got into writing The Wildatarian Diet?
I'd love to share that with your audience. Well, I am an integrative practitioner, and we have a clinical office in the Metro Washington, D.C. area. And we see people literally from all over the world with the most complex health conditions, such as MS and infertility and autoimmunity and Lyme disease, to working with some top professional athletes and Olympic hopefuls. So we see the gamut, and we treat pediatric to geriatric. And I've developed my own methodology, which underpins the nature of my practice, which is rooted in our genetic tendencies, and then how environment, including food, tends to express those genetic tendencies into a state of dis-ease. And we've had great success in the almost 16 years I've been in practice. And in my previous world, and this may speak to a lot of your audience members, I spent 20 years in corporate America. My last tour of duty, as I call it, I spent 10 years at Freddie Mac, and I ran one of their business units in their multifamily division. So I was a corporate executive, but at the time, after the birth of my first child, by the age of 3, we were told to expect brain seizures, that he would not be a normal child, that he would not grow past 5'4". He lived with life-threatening asthma. He didn't really talk until the age of 3. He was barely walking. And when you get that level of feedback from your pediatrician and that diagnosis, if you will, at first I told myself, okay, well, I'm going to be able to work through this situation with my son. But because I'm a solution seeker by nature and a risk manager at the time, I was a risk manager of multi-million dollars of assets, I decided that I would solution seek his path to wellness, and I would become that risk manager for his health. And so my day job was working at Freddie, and my night job was solution seeking his path to health. And nothing, I believe, is as determined as a mother's will.
Mm-hmm.
And at least in my case, that's what drove me, and I was undeterred. And even though I didn't have any training, I became this rabid researcher, and along the way, dots started connecting for me. And once I hit a tipping point on those connected dots, all of a sudden I had a way to bring him out of his condition. And now he's a robust 25-year-old who's done everything that he was told it would be impossible for him to do. So he became a junior Olympic gold medalist. He was valediction speaker at his high school. He achieved a full academic ride at University of Virginia. He's gone on to do really wonderful things with his life in a life of service. So this is where one of my mantras, that nothing is impossible. And if you ask the right questions, the right answers will follow.
Gotcha. Well, regarding someone that's, for instance, in corporate and trying to kind of like improve in health, their health and wellness, and looking to improve their health and wellness primarily, like first off, like one of the topics would be like through nutrition, which seems easy enough on the surface, but typically they would go, like to simplify it, they would typically go into like a trendy diet because it tends to be like very like ABC. I don't know if you ever read the book Animal Farm or watched. Yeah, it's very old, but the pig Napoleon would constantly kind of brainwash through propaganda the other animals into like 2 legs bad, like 4 legs good. And I feel a lot of the diets these days are the same way, like plants are good, meats are bad, or meats are good, plants are bad, you know what I mean? And they have these super huge blanket statements that I think do like a lot more harm than good for a large bulk majority of people that kind of prescribe to those diets. Can you kind of give your input on the state of kind of nutrition these days in America, and I guess the confusion that has like arisen in that area?
First of all, I love your analogy or metaphor related to Animal Farm. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.
And even
One of my favorite books.
the fact that it's called Animal Farm and we are farm raising animals. So
Yep, exactly.
you. This person was a prophet. This author was a prophet. So I really love the question because we believe, and my creation of the Wildatarian Diet, what it speaks to is that there is no one diet or no one supplement for everyone throughout their lifetime. And that we have to look to our genetic tendencies and our current state of health to define what foods serve us best. And I find myself saying a lot to my clients who are well-read and well-educated is that you're eating all the wrong foods. They're air quote the right foods according to some health expert, but they're the wrong foods for you if they're expressing a genetic tendency against your favor. Mm-hmm. So, there are many diet trends out there like the Whole30 that really focus on sulfur, or paleo or keto or vegan. And when someone asks me, Teri, is that the best diet for me? And my pat answer is maybe. We have to figure out, is your body able, for example, keto. So you have a woman in her 40s who may be perimenopausal, who's working 12 hours a day and trying to manage a family and a career and in the house. And she's been told by her husband or her boyfriend that, wow, keto really worked for me and you got to try keto. And so this woman goes on a keto plan and she gains 15 pounds and feels like crap. Well, why is that? And they're like, well, just didn't work for me. And I was so diligent, and how could this have happened if I followed the rules? Mm-hmm. Well, in this woman's particular case, she's perimenopausal, meaning that right now she's doing a hormone dance. Well, hormones are fat soluble. And if she's under a state of stress, she's pushing the cupcake. I call it the cupcake, which is the hormone of cortisol, and epinephrine, which is our stress hormone, because it is a fat and a sugar. Therefore, I call it the cupcake. So she's producing over amounts of fat. Stress is a fat, guys. It's a fat and a sugar. It's a cupcake. And if she has genetic tendencies not to be able to process fat, then she's actually hit a tipping point on fat. And taking a high keto diet is only going to make her more fat malabsorbed, where then the lymphatic system will get involved, because lymph's second role is to metabolize fat. And she's going to be fluffy. She's going to become fluffy. And when we're super fat malabsorbed, insulin is called the fat storage hormone. So now we can't break down fat and we're stressed. So we're producing all this epinephrine and cortisol, which is a sugar, and the body responds with insulin. And then all of a sudden insulin is oversecreted. It has nowhere to go. You can't break it down. You're going to get middle belly fat. And so that's just one example of how this diet that could make somebody really lean could also make somebody really not lean, and hormone imbalance, and actually less cognitive function, because 60% of the brain is made up of fat. And if you can't avail yourself of a fat, you're going to be even more fat malabsorbed. So in some cases, actually going lower fat can actually avail yourself of a better fat solution for you. And I actually told my clients, one of my clients who happened to be in the healthcare space, nuts, she was, had a fitness business, and she was keto and it was just not working for her, and her cognitive function was really tanking. And I said, nuts are making you nuts. And she came back and she said, Teri, you're absolutely right. These nuts were making me nuts. And now that I'm low fat, I can think better. I'm slimmer. I'm feeling so much better. My digestive system is better. So that's just one example of the animal farm approach, right? So painting a broad brush to a body that's very bio-individual.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like a lot of times the people that are inclined to go to those kind of blanket statement kind of nutrition plans also kind of miss the importance of developing the intuition necessary to find what works for your body long term? And that's kind of like, I don't know your opinion on that, but I feel like that's one of the most important parts of a nutrition plan.
I completely agree with you. And one of the things that we invoke in my practice, if I were asked, Teri, what are you really at your core? I'm an educator. Yes, we get people out of critical health crises, but ultimately our goal is to educate. And I've seen that over and over in my client base, that they become so facile in the language of body. So, I'm Spanish, I speak Spanish, I dabble in French, but I really speak body. And I'm a translator for body talk. And what I do is I help my clients understand the feedback mechanism that the body is continually imparting in the form of body talk, and we let them and allow them to tune in to what that means. And so it can be intuitive, but it really is a communication vehicle. And so it is become intuitive. The body is intuiting, hey, listen, if I'm burping after a meal and I can't build muscle and I work out all the time, I'm not breaking down protein. If I have a loose stool, if I have a gallbladder issue, if I have acne, and I'm in my 30s, I may not be metabolizing my hormones, therefore my fats, right? So those are just, if I have yellow around my lips, if my eyes aren't white, there's a little bit of yellowish, my bile is off, my liver capacity is off a little bit. Let's figure out how I can love my liver a little better.
And do you feel like a lot of times it's tough for the average person to establish that kind of natural intuition, which would have happened, like in the Homo sapien race, probably for like 195,000 years out of its 200,000 year existence, basically? Do you feel it's kind of gotten tougher simply because I guess like everyone around them in their workspace or just their family life is also kind of like physically or mentally unhealthy for the most part? It's safe to say like the bulk majority of people are, maybe not every single one, but.
Well, I think we've been disempowered, right? We've been told how to think and what to do and what to take. And what I tell my clients again is you're your greatest authority. And you get to listen to the input and then you make your final decision. And I do work with a lot of my practice is pediatric practice. And what's so fascinating, Eugene, is that these kids really become empowered about their bodies. And then I've worked with them in some cases over a decade, and I've taken them when they were itty bitties. I have one that I started when she was 10 months old, and she was a children's hospital throwaway. She was anaphylactic to over 40 things. She's now 7, and she's so intuitive about her body that she knows what it needs and what it doesn't need, and she gravitates towards those foods. Or she'll ask her mommy, does Miss Teri approve of this? We have to ask Miss Teri. So, but she has enough recognition about what her body's doing that she naturally gravitates towards what's best for her as a 7-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's this, the earlier we start, of course, as a family, the better it is for the children. And as they grow into, my children are a great example now, being in their 20s, mid-20s. But all these kids that I've worked with for multiple years, and not because they have to keep coming back to me because they're not well, but they choose to come back to me when they need a little tweaking, right? And they're like, I just had a gentleman, he's a gentleman now. I started working with him when he was 9, he's now 18. And he's so intuitive about his body. He's like, I just wanted to check in with you. This is where I'm feeling this is it. And am I right about this? I'm like, you're absolutely on point. Yes. He's like, gosh, that made sense to me. Right. So, but they keep themselves from falling off the cliff. And so, to your point about food, well, 90% of our topsoil has been eroded, and we're, because of our monocropping, we're very nutrient depleted. And so, even the corn of 30 years ago is not the corn of today, because corn is not, I don't think, a food source at all. It's just it's a vehicle carrier for mycotoxins, which then do a bunch of bad things to our body, anywhere from mental health to leaky gut to autoimmune conditions. So they're fire starters, I call them, for that. So we have to be really aware of how we purchase food, and in this environment where we're sheltering in place, then those providers become even more important on how we procure foods, and if we're ordering online, who those better providers are that are more responsible in general. I think anybody that has an ecological responsibility mission as part of their business model is someone you want to lean into, and someone that doesn't is someone you want to lean away from.
Do you ever get like a lot of people that kind of roll their eyes at you when you give them, like, for example, when you tell them like, oh, like if you just like slept well, lived closer to your core values, and ate well-sourced nutrition, like probably 95% of your like physical or mental pain would disappear? Like, do you feel like you get a lot of that? Because I feel a lot of times, especially in Western culture, like simplicity is kind of discounted too much. You know what I mean? Like people think, oh, because it's simple, it's not effective.
Yeah. Well, I say there's a lot of elegance and simplicity, actually. Simplicity is pure elegance in my mind. So in my private practice, by the time people get to see me, they've seen many practitioners and they have failed with them. Just yesterday, I had a young lady who'd gone everywhere and she can't remember the last time she felt well.
Mhm.
And 3 weeks after working with us virtually, because we're working virtually now, she's 90% better. How is that possible? It's only been 3 weeks. And I asked her yesterday, when was the last, she's 18. I think she's been feeling this way for at least 8 years. She goes, I can't remember when I felt well until now. And it was a primarily shift in her food and some supplementation. And so it's that simple. But in order for it to be that simple, I had to ask the right questions to make it simple for her and to put her on a very personalized food and supplementation plan that allowed her body to get what it needed to start making changes biochemically.
Why do you feel like a lot of the health professions have moved into these, like, I feel it's kind of moving back slightly in a better direction, and it used to be like this from the get-go, but why do you feel like they moved into these like 10-minute assessment models? You know, you come in there, they chat with you for like 5 to 10 minutes, maybe even less, and all of a sudden they have like a solution for your extremely like complicated health issues that have like a myriad of variables that led to that issue over probably like many decades or at least a decade. Like, how did that become acceptable in a health profession?
The traditional healthcare model became a function of the insurance. And so if insurance would only allow for this time because you had to book so many billable hours to be able to, you know, exist as a doctor in a practice, and that's sort of the model drove it. And then a lot of teaching came from the pharmaceuticals. So I think we got away from really being intuitive and listening. Now, I have a questionnaire that I've developed that I believe is very intuitive and very intentional, rather. And so before my clients even come to see me, I'll scan that questionnaire and I can get within a 90% accuracy rate of really what's going on with them before we start talking to them, before we do our assessment in the practice. That's because again, if you ask the right questions, the right answers will follow. And since my questionnaire is so intentional, and my model is based on a complex algorithm, but on the outside it looks really simple, I can get to a really quick and effective answer. And so that's why our practice has these really high efficacy rates of success. We ask the right questions at the beginning. I could ask 50 questions, and if they're all the wrong questions, I'm still not going to get what I need from that answer to give me the tools that I need to make a full and correct assessment.
Gotcha.
And we've really gotten away from the biochemistry of the body and the fact that the body acts in systems as a whole rather than systems in silos. The allopathic model says that if you're a nephrologist, you can't talk to a gastroenterologist, and if you're a gastroenterologist, you can't talk to somebody that has mental health issues. It's all related. We've cut the body up, and the body is an intricate and vast circuitry that's all part of one bigger piece. You can't disconnect it. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I agree. The reductionist model of kind of healthcare does really have like a tremendous amount of disadvantages. But on the other hand, it's also, you can spend your whole entire life just studying like a single organ, you know what I mean? Like if you really wanted to gain like supreme mastery and understanding of that specific organ. So it's always like, as a practitioner, a tough balance between like, how much is too much knowledge? You know, should I be spending a little bit more knowledge in this area? I don't know if you've kind of experienced that with yourself, because there's just so much to learn and all of it is so valuable from one vantage point or another.
Yeah, exactly. And this actually gets back to my previous career when, you know, where I ran this business unit, and I used to have people that were actually from Ivy Leagues that were analysts for me, and they would get into what I call analysis paralysis, you know, and they would analyze, but they didn't get to the core risk factor. I'm like, stop the analysis. Where's the risk in the deal? You know, and so they got so stuck in the weeds that they would miss the bigger picture, sort of like in kind of in the medical model. You get stuck on one organ and you miss what's the relative picture on how that organ is relating to the other organs. And so that's why I believe that my model, which is the Cochrane method under which the Wildatarian approach was birthed, is an elegant model that's simple in its execution, because we can go in and ninja, as I call it, and this goes to this, goes to this, goes to this, boom, 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 here, this is what that means for you. And so I think that there is again, it's a modulating to know if you're too far in the weeds, you're going to miss the picture. Sort of like when you're in an art gallery, if you get too close to the picture, you're not going to see what the essence of the picture is. You've got to step away a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The whole
Oh,
picture.
okay. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I'm going to use that, but I'll quote you like when I say it. Okay. Well, is there any kind of like, I guess outside of the intuition model of a nutrition approach, is there any type of like genetic testing or blood work or any of that sort of testing a person can do if they want to find out like a nutrition program that would generally work for them? And how accurate is this testing?
So again, 23andMe is really based on an algorithm of a set of, well, you're more likely to have this and this and this, right? And so, and Ancestry.com, those type, Opus 23, those are models that speak to nutritional tendencies. And again, the way that we do it is we take that as one piece in the overall assessment of that individual. So looking at your genetic tendencies. Another thing is, the organic acid test, I think, is a really good test that tests neurotransmitters. It tests whether you have any bacterial markers. It looks to your body's ability to process some enzymes. You can do a diurnal cortisol test, which tells you not just in the morning how your cortisol is doing, but cortisol, we got to measure it throughout a 24-hour period to understand how cortisol, are you like blowing it at the beginning and you got high cortisol in the morning and then you tank, between 2 and 4, and you're wondering why you're falling asleep at your desk after lunch. And so we've got to look at things in what is, the highest and best use of my resources from a monetary perspective. And, we direct individuals based on what's their symptomology, right? If they're having a lot of hormone issues, but if they have great gut health, then I'm not going to necessarily say, go take an organic test. Let's look at your, a whole hormone panel based on saliva, right? But we've also, in my practice, I've developed my own methodology of applied kinesiology within the model, the greater construct of applied kinesiology. And that works really well. And I have a naturopathic doctor that's been trained under this methodology, instructed by the Cochrane method. And so, we really get to a very granular approach and assessment of that individual. And so a lot of times the individuals that come to our practice will come with many tests already, in their, I've actually had people come in with like wagons worth of supplements and folders that are, bigger than my head. And they still didn't have an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then we help them distill that into something that's actionable and efficacious and sustainable. So, one of the things that I believe that I'm a pioneer in is achieving is a sustainable health model. And that's part of the Wildatarian approach, because it speaks to living in a sustainable environment. And if our body is not sustaining health, then we are not contributing to the sustainable macroorganism, which is our planet.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this podcast. If sourcing high quality food is something you're interested in, but definitely find the subject matter confusing, check out my book on Amazon titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide. It's a very easy and non-technical read that's beautifully illustrated and comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning material. The book, in a very simplified way, breaks down the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. It'll cover how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and many other related topics. Thanks again for checking out the podcast, and when you have a second, please check out Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin on Amazon.
Sources that are minnows. And again, into the analysis paralysis, we don't want to make it complicated. We want to make it simple in its application. And so what are the sharks? Well, the sharks are glyphosate. That is the active ingredient of the herbicide Roundup that is having multiple deleterious effects on our body. And sadly, because it's sprayed so broadly across our crops in the United States, it's almost impossible to get away from glyphosate. But what you don't want is you don't want to partake of a wheat product that has been stripped, first of all its whatever might be left in its nutrients of its whole grain, that's non-organic, and that is filled with preservatives and food dyes. So one of my big philosophies is when you're looking at buying something in the grocery store that has a package, if you can't read it, don't eat it, right? That means if there are numbers and colors that you cannot pronounce, it's not a food, do not pick that up and put it in your grocery cart, okay? That's gonna take the body multiple efforts to try to break through something that it doesn't understand because it's not made of it. The body understands like with like, and if it's something that it's not natural, it's going to have to work a lot harder to break down that substance. For example, high fructose corn syrup is something that the body has a harder time understanding, and it leads to high cholesterol beyond sugar dysregulation and other things. So the glyphosate, the packaged foods that contain ingredients that you can't read, heavy meats, part of my Wildatarian approach, especially the chicken, I call it the dirty bird. I've deemed it the dirty bird. Studies show that these animals, because of the way that they've been fed, and more importantly, the way that they've been crowded, in particular the chickens, are creating in their tissue these truncated protein structures by the name of amyloids, which have now received a lot of attention as it relates to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. But much of the research out there that's not been applied clinically is that these amyloids are now not only contributing to that, but it can contribute to kidney disease, to diabetes, to chronic autoimmune conditions, to cancer. And so it's become a really big problem. And I can't tell you how many individuals in my practice that have gone wild and then had decided to go have one meal of chicken and how it wrecked them. Mm-hmm. The body went to healing, and then it had to go into something that it couldn't digest. And so, and again, not all chickens are created equal. If you can find a heritage breed, that's great. But we say, don't eat chicken, eat something else instead. Don't eat beef, especially beef that has been given hormones and antibiotics and has been slaughtered in a feedlot farm type environment, because again, that will contain amyloids. And also these animals are given things to fatten themselves up, and we know that toxins are held in fatty tissue. So therefore, the more marbled that meat, the more toxins that animal is going to contain, which then you will eat. And the bigger you are, you're going to store more toxins. And they've done research that cancer patients that were obese had almost a 70% higher mortality rate than their non-obese counterparts because of the toxic load.
So really quick, in terms of the amyloids, does that build up in the animal tissue due to the crowding, or does that build up in the animal tissue due to the primarily the fact that they probably feed the animal genetically modified corn and soy?
The studies show it's the crowding, but the corn don't help, because then it makes their bodies less robust. But they've done studies that, they took ducks and they crowded them in 6 months, and most of them had amyloids. Within another 6 months, most of them perished. They also showed that when you stop crowding the animals, especially chicken and mice, the amyloids resolve.
Is that some response to the stress that happens from over? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I believe so.
Well, how about if you had a chicken raised on pasture that's fed a strictly species-specific diet that chicken would be eating, even if no humans were around, like zero grains, basically.
And that's where you have to go to who was that chicken's mom and grandmom, because DNA is transferred generationally, and we know that now.
Gotcha. Do you feel like wild meat will always be superior to even the best farm-raised meat out there?
In my experience, if we keep our wild, and we don't start domesticating and farming wild, then yes, because the studies and the science shows that it's richer in zinc, it's richer in iron, richer in minerals, it's lower in cholesterol. A pasture-fed bison has got more essential fatty acids than salmon. So, and higher in omega-3s versus the omega-6 was just the inflammatory essential fatty acid, which we don't need for our heart. So yes, as long as we keep that sacred, if you will, and create an environment for sustainably raised wild game, even if you're not shooting it yourself, or you're doing it with a bow and arrow, then I believe that will continue to be the the way. And the better phrase for the dirty bird is, I should say, the bird we dirtied.
Yeah.
Poor chicken.
They were fine just before humans started domesticating everything,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, what's your take on, we covered, meats in a bit of detail. What's your take on produce? Because there's a lot of genetic modification, obviously, that's happened over 10,000 years just in that category alone. And the stuff you typically find at the grocery store is like a far, far cry of their wild ancestors that you typically either find in the wild today or have found like a long time ago.
Yes, another great question. Well, foraging has become popular again. People are foraging to look for wild mushrooms, to look for wild berries. They're looking to go back to nature. And the subtext or the subtitle of my book, it's Living as Nature Intended. And so the produce, there's a list that is published yearly called the Dirty Dozen. And so those are the dirtiest, air quote, fruits and vegetables that are out in the marketplace based on the pesticide spray and that vegetable's ability to be vulnerable or invulnerable to these pesticides and herbicides. Typically the thinner skinned fruit, the lettuces are going to be more vulnerable than a watermelon. Like, I'm not going to buy an organic watermelon because, boy, to get through that skin is really, really, it's a tough skin. Even though the seed, I try not to be genetically modified, but because then a genetically modified seed will bear a genetically modified fruit, which has a whole different biochemical construct potentially in our body. But if I'm eating a strawberry, I won't eat an unorganic strawberry. Or apples. Apples are one of the most sprayed crops. But a pineapple, I should be okay with, right? And a lot of things too is, hopefully when we get back to be able to participate in farmers markets, which I frequent during that season, is that I get to know my farmers and I ask them very direct questions. How are you organic? No. But do you spray? Well, no, but we're not technically classified as organic. Well, I'd rather be with that farmer that's going to be looking me in the eye and telling me how, and I really get into the questioning. I think as a consumer, it's my right to be a compassionate inquirer, but I still get to inquire because I'm going to be putting that food source in my body.
Yeah, there's also Dan Kittredge. He's a pretty popular farmer. I don't know if you're familiar with that name or not, but
I have heard of it. Yes.
Yeah, I think he has a website called Bionutrient Food Association, and they made basically a spectrometer, which allows you to, on the spot, scan the produce, and it gives you the nutritional profile of that specific produce on the spot, on demand. And I thought that was like super cool. I haven't bought it yet, but I do intend to buy that device. I thought that was super cool because that just allows like the average person that might not necessarily know the right questions to ask the farmer, because like you mentioned, there's a lot of knowledge that has to go into knowing even how to ask the right questions to give you the right answers. So that's for the listeners. I think that thing's like super cool.
That's really cool. Thank you for that. You've taught me something today.
Yeah. Thank you. That means a lot. Do you personally shop at the supermarket at all, or do you just avoid that place?
So, well, I shop at a small local store called My Organic Market, acronym MOMS, which I love. And, they only purchase from certain providers that I really respect. Whole Foods I will go to for certain things, and farmers markets. And then for my wild game, I have an organic, it's called literally Organic Butcher here in the Metro DC area. And I know the owner, and their whole staff knows me there, and I'm always peppering them with questions. But I really trust their Wildatarian sources, and they'll come in and they're like, because it's a line out the door always, and they're like, "Oh, you're a Wildatarian." They'll like tag people as Wildatarians based on what they're ordering. I'm
guessing people that shop at Costco don't count as Wildatarians then, huh?
Well, you can be a Wildatarian and shop at Costco. You just have to be informed about what choices you're going to make within that big construct. So,
do you know of any like websites where you can kind of order like wild varieties of crops? Like even if they're frozen, like frozen fruit, for example, but like wild varieties.
Thrive Market is one. Thrive Market has it's a good website for really interesting and clean food overall. Vital Choice for seafood is really excellent. The owner, Randy, and I know each other, and his philosophy is, again, I lean into the mission of his company. D'Artagnan Foods for wild game here, they ship to 50 states overnight. I get a lot of what I can't get at the organic butcher, or if I have to, sheltering in place and I'm not driving a lot these days, I'll source it from there. So it's really, and when you come to see us, we have a whole list of providers that we really like, and actually brands that we respect, that we really respect, and we really say this is a better source than this. Not everything is created equal, right? So it is an education process, but what we try to do is we try to demystify the complexity and create a roadmap that is executable, but most importantly, it is efficacious. So it works, and it's an educational model in the process. And so it's not like the allopathic model where it's just like, take this pill and see if it works, but we're not telling you why you're taking the pill. I spent a lot of time during my practice in consult with my clients, explaining them a lot of biochemistry. And my staff used to laugh at me because I was explaining deep biochemistry, and they were saying, Teri, your client has no idea what you're talking about. I'm like, I don't care. The body's listening and it's making connections. And even if that person got one aha moment out of the entire hour, that was enough to create a catalyst for their body to behave differently. And that's empowering, because I was completely transparent and showing them their roadmap, their internal roadmap and internal terrain as to why that was happening to their body.
Gotcha. Well, the next question, this one is vast and like a multiple hour conversation in and of itself, and you have like a lot of experience in this environment yourself as well. What's your take on, is it possible to optimize your mental and physical health working in like a typical corporate environment? I know there are various levels of integrity of corporate work as well, depending on your job, who your boss is, who your coworkers are, the specific company, et cetera, but just to simplify the conversation and kind of average it out, do you feel it is possible to optimize your mental and physical health in that environment?
Okay, so great question. And I have lived that environment, so I know I've been in there. I can speak from, a place of knowledge. Back to one of my mantras, nothing is impossible. We have to have structure around our work life. We have to be intentional. We have to know that the thought creates the thing. If we're thinking that we can't do it and it's going to be impossible, and there's three ways I believe to be in life. One is life happening to me, which is the victim mentality. If we take the approach, well, my boss is trying to fill in the blank, or my coworker is trying to fill in the blank, or this corporation is trying to fill in the blank as it respects to me, then we're in a victim mentality, and that's not going to get us anywhere. We can't be optimally healthy because we're going to be in a scarcity mode of someone always trying to get something and life happening to us. And then there's the second level of existence, which is life happening with us. So then my boss is working with me, my company's working with me, my colleagues are working with me. And so that's a co-collaborative effect, which puts the body into homeostasis, because we're not feeling like we're being threatened at every moment, which then initiates the autonomic nervous system, which then throws cortisol and epinephrine, which makes us less smart, less insulin sensitive, and we eventually gain weight. And then the highest and most effective is life happening through us. And this is when we are in the practice of connecting to source, of being in gratitude, of being in joy, of being in purpose, life happening through us. And they've done studies that show that when we are entertaining those higher vibration emotional aspects, we can actually raise our IQ significantly, and we also raise our immune system by up to 50% for up to 5 hours. And so it's the practice of, no matter what environment you're in, notice what you're noticing. Am I in a contractive state? And am I in the practice of life happening at me or to me? Or am I in an expansive state? And am I in a practice of life happening with me and through me? Am I observant to what my own paradigms are? Is this an old pattern that keeps showing up for me that's allowing me from being my best and highest self? And the way to dismantle that is call it for what it is. If it's hiding in the shadows and you don't even know what it is, then you can't do anything about it. And so, yes, even in a 12-hour, 13-hour days, I'm not in corporate America, but owning my own business, I still work. I work much longer hours than I did. And I work long hours in my corporate world. But as a business owner, you never really leave work. But, and because this is a passion project for me. But I have developed a practice of daily exercise, of gratitude, of journaling, of movement that is not just, running and weightlifting, but one of flow, of checking my thoughts to see where am I, and noticing what I'm noticing, and to know that I'm imperfect. And if I get out of alignment, that's where I was for the minute, and not self-flagellate about getting out of alignment and put myself back in line. And so, yes, we can be at peace in whatever environment we're in, even if we are incarceration. Mandela, who spent so many years in incarcerated, was actually free because in his mind, he had found peace.
Well, I feel like inmates too, at least they have a lot of me time. Definitely don't get that working 15 hours a week, especially with kids and a family. So, yeah.
But it just takes a moment to recalibrate.
Yeah.
They've done studies that, and I've suggested this to many of my corporate clients, and I work with a lot of CEOs, is that the study showed that setting your clock or your iPhone or whatever for a minute, where you just go into nothing 6 times a day, may be even more effective than meditating for an hour on either end of your day. Because what it does is it does a hardwire reset to your autonomic nervous system.
Gotcha. Well, do you have any closing statements that you would like to add? Are you working on any other books at the moment?
No, I'm not working on any other books. I am launching a new initiative called the Global Sustainable Health Institute, which is going to be around, it's taking my methods and my model that I've used in private practice and starting to go out to corporations and really espousing sustainable health that will, for corporations, have such a positive outcome from an employee satisfaction, employee health perspective, employee mentality, but also reduction of healthcare costs. And then also teaching my model to practitioners. So we're going to educate, and we're going to try to go out into the corporate space and to effectively then teach the teachers, and also teach the leaders of leaders. So I've got a special program that I work with leaders of leaders, because those C-suite or entrepreneurs, whatever we run, if we are a leader, the energy trickles down. And so being at a higher vibration and a higher state of beingness will only benefit any of the individuals that we touch down the line.
Yeah, there's a huge ripple effect, obviously. So
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, and so the message I leave your audience is that no matter what vocation you're in or avocation you're in, the thought creates the thing, folks. If we're in a scarcity, to me, at me mindset, we will always be a prisoner of our mind. If we are in an abundance and curiosity state, the what if it could be different, and just opening that door releases the body from an autonomic nervous system response that starts the healing process right there.
Yeah, I mean, personally, like I thought for the longest time it was cheesy to do like a gratitude meditation, daily. And then a while back, I started doing it just like 10 minutes a day, nothing crazy after my workout. And it really did make like a huge positive impact on my life. And it was like just 10 minutes a day, basically. So yeah, I mean, to reinforce your idea, I thought it was like the dumbest thing in the world for the longest time. And then I'm like, you know what, I'll give it a try. And it actually did, did do wonders.
Yep.
So. Do you have like a preferred place where you prefer people to get your books from? Is Amazon preferred, or is it your personal website? That would be
I
the
think Amazon's the fastest. You know, you can ship, and you can either do Kindle or you can do the hard copy, or you can do both. I have a lot of clients or users of my book that they do both versions.
best.
So
Okay. I'll include your website and your Amazon links in the description section. Are there any other things you want to include before we close out?
well, our website has a host of program materials, anywhere from a 7-day detox to our 45-day Heal and Seal program, which is the adjunct to our book, and it has a maintenance program as well. Of course, if any of your listeners want to have a private consultation with us, myself or my naturopathic doctor, we see people from all over the world. You don't have to physically be here to avail yourself of a full suite of our services. Our website has a tremendous amount of information. Our blogs are very science rich for those nerds out there. And we're on all over social media. And then just to have your listeners stay tuned for the launching of my Global Sustainable Health Institute. If one of your corporate peeps are out there and they're like, I want to bring this model to my company, give us a call and we'll get out there, because I have now, this is not something that I'm going to throw up against the wall and see if it works. I have a 15-year model that shows this works, and this is one of the, I believe, the best ways to achieve sustainable health. And that's what we want to be. We want to be sustainable here. And we're talking about the long game, especially with all the uncertainty happening in the world right now. The immune system and our mindset is what's going to get us through these very rigorous and uncertain times.
Yeah. Well, really quick, Teri, I got to ask you this question. I meant to close it up, but I think you'd be great at answering it. So the government spent basically like $2 trillion on a stimulus package to kind of basically get people on their feet. Now, my one question is, if they spent basically like 1/100 of that on, in just short, like basically brainwashing people on how to be mentally and physically healthy, how to have good communication skills, how to be in intuition with their core values, they live close to that from elementary school through high school, wouldn't you think like that would pretty much solve like the bulk majority, I mean, pretty much all the health problems like we're encountering these days, and costs like a invisible fraction of what the universal healthcare program is going to cost?
Well, back to my original saying is, if they're not asking the right questions, they're not going to get the right answers. And so, again, it can be simple to solve something, which what we are seeing even before, the stimulus package was in place, was the vast majority of the diseases in our country are nutritional diseases. And so if we can get back to living as nature intended, in balance with nature and in balance with self, then yes, indeed. I think we could have, especially for the young generation that are dealing with so many mental health care issues, we could really turn this tide. Absolutely.
Gotcha. Well, thanks again, Teri, for taking your time to come on the show. It's great to meet you. So really liked your book, and obviously I wish you the best all the time. So
thanks so much. Same to you.
All right, thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this podcast. If sourcing high quality food is something you're interested in, but definitely find the subject matter confusing, check out my book on Amazon titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide. It's a very easy and non-technical read that's beautifully illustrated and comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning material. The book, in a very simplified way, breaks down the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. It'll cover how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and many other related topics. Thanks again for checking out the podcast, and when you have a second, please check out Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin on Amazon.